Hello everyone and welcome to my Wukong guide. So in this guide we're going to start off with the abilities. Let's get into it. The first ability you want to know about is Wukong's passive, Stone Skin. With Wukong's passive, every time you attack an opponent you get one stack. When you get a stack you get 5 to 9 bonus armor and you regenerate 0.5% of your maximum health. Overall this ability is amazing for fighting. And it's really overpowered for level 1 fights, so one thing you can often try to do is do a sneaky level 1 fight on the opponent with Wukong, and you're going to most likely win most level 1 fights in that direction, so you can sneak into the enemy bush, the tri-bush, instead of wait, and then try and wait for them to come after helping the jungle on red buff, and you can get a massive fight going. Next up we have Wukong's Q, Crushing Blow, extremely important ability. This ability gives you range every time you level it up, from 75 bonus range to 175. So once you're at max range, it's almost in between an auto attack to a ranged attack. So you want to use this to utilize the range. It's super important because Wukong isn't always that strong, but then you have a ranged advantage. You can attack people without them being able to attack you. Also, it's important to use this ability first because you reduce the opponent's armor, then you hit them. It gives you a little bit of damage too, so that's all important. One thing to notice, you can combo this with your Wukong W, the clone, so your clone can also use the Q. And then of course, as its normal abilities, there's an attack animation cancel, so you can use it to attack animation cancel. And then the last thing to note about Wukong's Q is the cooldown is reduced by 0.5 seconds every time you or your clone attacks an opponent. Next up, we have Wukong's W. Wukong's W is an invisibility decoy, so you use it, you get a decoy, a fake clone, and then you become invisible for 1 second. Now your clone can attack opponents, it can give you passive stacks, and it also works well with your Q because it does a lot of damage already, right? So you want to try and utilize your clone with your Q or your ultimate because it does a lot of damage and helps out a lot. Next up we have Nimbus Strike. Nimbus Strike, you dash your opponents, you get 2 additional clones that also dash them. These clones can block non-targeted spells, so skill shots and so on for 25 seconds, which is a very short period of time, but it can be used really nicely. One thing to note is the E gives you a lot of attack speed, 40 to 60%, and it also gives you a clone that attack speed, so this ability is extremely useful and gives you a ton of damage. Now let's talk about Wukong's ultimate, Cyclone. You start spinning around, your clone can also spin around, and you do a ton of damage. You do 1 to 2% of target's maximal health, and a quarter of your attack damage every 0.25 seconds. So you're going to be attacking continuously with this and do a ton of damage to opponent. Now you want to use this ability mainly to kite people backwards in teamfights. Let's make an example here. The opponents are going to engage in your team, you clone away towards your teammates so you can start kiting backwards. And then you click ultimate, the clone and yourself are going to be spinning on the opponents that are diving into your team. This is generally the optimal way to use the ability. Sure, you can also use it for engages and other things, but often this is a kite ability and it's amazing for that purpose. Alright, now let's get into Wukong's skill order. So on Wukong, generally you want to start E level 1, then you go W or Q, you can choose whichever you need in the specific lane, and then afterwards you max Q into E into W. It's a pretty simple, straightforward path. Now let's go over Wukong's runes. So, Conqueror is Wukong's bread and butter. You always want to have Conqueror. After that you go for Triumph. You go Alacrity or Tenacity depending on what you need, mostly Alacrity, and then you go Last Stand. These are generally the runes you want to have. Now the second tree is much more interesting. So you can go Inspiration with Boots and Potions, that's a very normal path to take, overall super powerful. The second thing you can do if you want to do a little bit more damage, you can go Domination and then you can take Sudden Impact and Ravenous Hunter, because Ravenous Hunter gives you a lot of healing later on. Now for the early game build and for quicker power spikes with items, you want to go Inspiration. For a little bit more damage and a little bit more healing later on, you want to go Sudden Impact and Ravenous Hunter. So you gotta make that choice yourself. Now in the small runes, you can take in the first one attack damage or attack speed. I prefer attack speed, most people do. It feels nicer, but attack damage might be slightly better. Either one is fine. The second one, you definitely want to have attack damage. And then the third one, you want to take armor or magic resist depending what you need, but mostly armor because you will be hit by a lot of minions, and armor often tends to be stronger early game. Alright, now finally let's talk about the items. This is the most interesting part about Wukong, so you gotta bear with me, this is gonna be a little bit crazy. Now for mythic items, Wukong actually uses 4 different ones. The first one I want to talk about is Gore Drinker. Gore Drinker is amazing if you want to be a tankier person that's mainly oriented to peel for your team, so if you're engaging the opponents or if you're peeling for your team because the enemies are engaging on you and you're mostly just poking them and kiting with your team comp. In those cases you want to have Gore Drinker. Gore Drinker is really good for that. Now instead, if you want to be more damage oriented with some high burst while still being somewhat tanky, you can go for Sundress. Sundress is great against teams where you don't want to be the main tank, you're kind of like an off tank or something like that, and then you still want to do a lot of burst damage and you don't want to be hitting people a lot, you want to be bursting and then getting out a little bit, bursting and then getting out a little bit. Then the next option is Trinity Force. Trinity Force is the item you have if you want to be hitting people continuously, you want to be more split pushing, you want to be doing damage all the time, and you want to focus on that. This is a much squishier build, and you're going to be a lot easier to kill, so this is definitely not a build you want to go if you want to tank anything. It's mostly just if you don't want to tank, you already have tanks, or you don't need to tank at all, and you want to focus a little bit on split pushing too. Now, last but not least, you can also go Eclipse if you want to be an assassin as Wukong. This build, you're full squishy, you're going to do tons of damage, you're going to go straight in, and then you're going to just focus on killing people as fast as possible. This is a risky build that honestly, you have to be an amazing Wukong player to even pull off. I talked to a lot of Wukong mains, and some of them actually go for this build, so you can test it out if you want to, but it's at your own risk. Now let's get into the follow-up items. So for the follow-up items, generally what you want to go is either Black Cleaver or Ravenous Hydra. So Black Cleaver is against more tankier teams where you need the armor penetration. It's really, really good if you have a lot of AD on your team as well, because Wukong is amazing at applying it. Now if you don't really need the armor penetration, then you want to go for Ravenous Hydra instead. Ravenous Hydra is super good on Wukong right now. It's a ton of damage, it gives you everything you could ever want, and overall it's an amazing ability. Plus it gives you the option of getting a Tiamat, and Tiamat is super good on Wukong. If you don't have a Tiamat, you lose a lot of tempo on Wukong, so it's very important to get that one. Now the third item you want to look at is generally going to be Asterix Gauge. Asterix Gauge is really strong on Wukong because again it's just a bruiser item, you get tankier. Tankier is nice, so Asterix is almost always a good option. Now if you didn't get a Black Cleaver early and you really still feel like you need the Black Cleaver, you can also go Black Cleaver at this point, but generally we'll go for Asterix. Now for the items to finish up your build, the two last items that you'll be getting, you should generally look for something like a Death Stance, Chempong Chainsword, or Guardian Angel. So it's pretty obvious. The Death Stance is if you're strong and you don't die really quickly, then you can start regening a lot with the Death Stance. Death Stance is super good for that. It's for sustain a longer fight. The Chainsword is if you need Grievous Wounds and you just want a ton of damage. Grievous Wounds have been buffed in this season. It's a lot stronger now, so sometimes you gotta go that. You're gonna be a little bit squishier, but sometimes that's worth it. And then the last item, the Guardian Angel. Well, I mean, if you're going in, you're a Suicide Bomber, you do your damage and you expect it to die, in that case, Guardian Angel is amazing. It's basically a Suicide Bomb item. It's really, really strong for that purpose, and that is why you want to buy Guardian Angel. Now, I hope you guys liked this guide. If you liked it, click the subscribe, follow my channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace, boys.